Okay, so just before we start, we hit 100 subscribers. We've actually gone a bit over that. I just haven't been able to comment on that because, I'm making a bit busy, sadly. But yeah, very big achievement, I think. If you want me to do like 100 subscriber special, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll just consider this to be a 100 subscriber special. And on with the video. Hello everyone, welcome to my Tollan vs. Aschen video. I don't really know how to start this video off, so let's just jump straight into it. Background of the factions. The Tollan are one of the most advanced groups of humans in the Milky Way galaxy. Their homeworld, Tollan, was destroyed by their neighbors, the Setarians, after the Tollan gave them advanced technology, which led to a war among the Setarians, which ended in their extinction, but also shifted Tollan out of its orbit. They evacuated to Tollan, but sent a group back to bury the Stargate. This is when SG-1 met them, when they came through the gate and rescued those who had been sent back to bury the gate and had been rendered unconscious. The Tollan were a peaceful society, though a little arrogant when it came to dealing with less advanced races, though they did have contact, even with allies, with some of the other advanced races, such as the Nox and the Tok'ra. They defended their new homeworld with an ion cannon defense system, which would destroy any ship, mostly the Goa'uld, that came into orbit. Sadly, their society would not last long on their new homeworld, as the system Lord Anubis had developed better shielding technology for his ships, which could withstand the ion cannons. A series of unfortunate events later, Tollan was attacked by Anubis and the Tollan are presumed extinct. The Aschen are another group of advanced humans in the Milky Way galaxy, although they never learned how to use the gate system properly and could only travel to worlds that were close by to their homeworld. This, for better or worse, led them to relying on spaceships to get around. The Aschen, unlike the Tollan, were not peaceful and were in fact conquerors, though not in the way you or I might think it. If they encounter a race, they usually approach that race with offers of advanced technology and membership in their confederation. One of the new technologies is a drug that's supposed to do something good, either extending the human lifespan or curing a disease, and it does do that, while at the same time sterilizing the population. When the numbers have decreased enough, the Aschen move in and take control of the world, usually turning into farmland. Earth almost fell for this trap, but thanks to time travel shenanigans, they were able to discover this and stop them. There is a book that details the Aschen's revenge on Earth, and I am going to reference some of the tech in the book, but if you want the full story, watch the full video about the Aschen. So there's our factions, but how would these two fight? They never met each other, and they never knew the existence of the other. Though they may have. You see, in the episode where the Tollan was destroyed between two fires, the literal next episode, I am not kidding, is when SG-1 met the Aschen in 2001. That's the name of the episode, by the way. So if the order was switched around for this season, there could have been a period of time in which both the Aschen and Tollan knew about the other through Earth. But for this scenario, I want to keep it between the Tollan and the Aschen as much as possible, so I'm going to say the Aschen make first contact. Neither race were really much of the explorative type. In fact, the Tollan were pretty isolationist, while the Aschen were more stuck due to their lack of knowledge on how to use the Stargates. We do know that the Aschen used ships to get around mostly within their space, and during the first diplomatic meeting between the Aschen and the Tollan did express an interest in meeting the more advanced races. So for this scenario, I'm going to say the Aschen launch a deep space expedition and come across Tollan. Since the Aschen are an advanced race, the Tollan would welcome them to Tollan as long as they agreed to come peacefully. It's hard to tell how the Aschen would react to this, not so much the offer to meet the Tollan, but how they would go around conquering the Tollan themselves, since as far as we know, the Aschen only conquered less advanced peoples. My best guess would be that they would do the same thing, just change some of the details for the Tollan. So instead of offering technology and membership in the Confederation, they would merely offer, say, a trade exchange. The Aschen would at least want 3 things from the Tollan: knowledge on how to use the Stargates, knowledge of other advanced races, and knowledge on how to build Stargates. Yes, I am going to keep bringing that up again. The Tollan would probably be willing to give the first 2 points, but I don't really know how they would react to the third thing. Probably not if I had to take an educated guess. I'm also not really sure what the Tollan would want from the Aschen. The Aschen definitely have technologies that the Tollan don't, such as the gas giant to a star thing, but since the Tollan don't really travel off-world and they seem to be doing fine food-wise, they probably don't want it. It's an interesting idea they'd probably be interested to learn about, but it's not something they really need. The only thing the Aschen could trade that would be of interest to them would be the longer life vaccine. Now, I'm sure the Aschen would not be stupid enough to give them the vaccine without making some modifications to keep the Tollan from finding out what it really would do. Despite that, I feel like the Tollan would be advanced enough to find out what it actually does and would kick the Aschen off their planet. Now, this is where we come to a small problem. You see, this video is about a war between the Aschen and Tollan, but neither side really fights wars in the way we see it. The Tollan wouldn't go to war at all, they would just sit on their planet and go about their daily lives. The Aschen are used to working with long-term plans, hoping to avoid fighting altogether. And from what we get in the book, it seems the Aschen prefer to work through proxies than direct confrontation. That being said, in the original timeline, they did bring down the Ghoul World Empire, and while it was probably done with a bioweapon, people do refer to it as a war, so I'm guessing some fighting did take place. And in the second timeline, when they were found out by Carter and the Ambassador, they immediately went to make a first strike on Earth. So for here, we're going to say the Aschen do decide to take that chance to fight them, but it'll be limited to 1 or 2 battles. Worlds. The Aschen definitely have the advantage here as they have more worlds under their control. We don't get an exact number, but we're told the Aschen have multiple worlds in their confederation, and with multiple worlds means multiple resources to call upon for a war. In contrast, the Tollan only have 1, maybe 2 worlds under their control, the first being their home world, Tollana, and the second being a colony stated in an RPG book. I don't think I really need to go into detail why this is kind of a disadvantage for the Tollan, since basically means the Aschen can focus all their efforts on 1 singular world. Maybe 2 if they decide to go after the colony, but that depends if they even find out about it. Technology. It's hard to say who was more advanced technologically. Both groups could do some very impressive things technologically, but they were usually different from one another, and they don't have any overlapping areas I can compare. So I think I'm going to have to say both groups are roughly equal technologically. They were just good at doing different things. For example, the Aschen are good at bioweapons, while the Tollan are good at defensive weapons. Okay, so I actually have to take a slight pause here to address something. So in my Aschen video, I stated that turning Jupiter into a star would be a stupid idea because in order to turn Jupiter into a star, you would have to add mass, which would kind of add gravity, and have a lot of adverse effects on the solar system. Many of you in the comments were willing to tell me your thoughts on this.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong.
So fun fact about me is I was actually an astronomy student for a couple of years, and I'm still good with friends with one of my old professors. I decided to reach out to her, and this is basically what she said about it.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong.
Yeah, in order to turn Jupiter into a star, you have to add mass. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But
No buts!
Anything less is more science fantasy and less actual science. And yes, we're dealing with science fiction, but again, it's more science fantasy if you're not adding mass. You do need to add mass because Jupiter is actually too small to do fusion on its own. To get Jupiter to a minimum of a red dwarf star, you have to add a minimum of 80 Jupiters. And again, that's just to a minimum of a red dwarf level star. As for the effects of doing that, it kind of depends on how big you make the star. Best case scenario is that it shifts the orbits of some of the moons of Jupiter and the asteroid belt, and maybe tilts Earth a little bit, but overall everything would be fine. However, it really wouldn't have any effect on Earth to the point of doing it would be completely pointless. Worst case scenario is that not only does it pull more on Earth to the point the day-night cycle gets kind of screwed up, but it also has a negative impact on the plants. See, a fun fact about plants is that they kind of need nighttime too to do photosynthesis.
I guess plants need sleep just as much as the rest of us. And by adding another star, you add too much sunlight. You know, too much of a good thing kind of thing. And you would get weaker plants as a result. You can actually see this in real life with plants that are in the country versus ones that are in the city. So by turning Jupiter into a red dwarf, you would either get nothing to happen, or you would have the opposite effect of what was intended to happen. By the way, if you were to turn Jupiter into a full-on, sun kind of star, which is what I assume they were trying to do, that would bring in the apocalypse level stuff I was said in the original video. And to be clear on something, I'm not making this segment to be an ass and say I'm right, you're wrong. When I originally made that video, when a lot of people said I was wrong, I just kind of went with it because I assumed I was wrong. However, upon reflection and again asking the advice of a professional astronomy teacher from a university, I found I wasn't. And I just felt it important to clarify that.
Armies. Neither side really had armies that we saw in the show. The Tollan are far too peaceful to have a military. That being said, they did seem to have a security force, but this is probably closer to a police force than anything else. It should also be noted that for the security force, their weapons only have a stun setting, so that's not really something you want in an armed military defending your world. The Aschen also don't really have a military that we saw on screen, but according to the wiki, they heavily relied on combat drones in ground and space combat, and given they have a warship in the book, I'm going to assume they have some kind of military. Spaceships. We know both sides use spaceships. We just know absolutely nothing about them. We never even get to see them on screen. Despite that, we can come to some logical conclusions. With the Tollan, since it is constantly stated that the ion cannons are the only defense system for the planet, that their spaceships either have very limited or non-existent weapon systems. And during the evacuation of Tolana during the Goa'uld invasion, we hear over a transmission that the Goa'uld are just slaughtering the Tollan ships. Although this is possible that this was just because this was Anubis' ships, and Anubis' ships were more powerful than anything the Tollan had ever dealt with. The only other thing we can glean about Tollan spaceships is it's possible their ships were really slow in comparison to other spacefaring civilizations. As during the first contact between the Tollan and the Tari in 1998, Norm said he would not live long enough to see Tollan spaceships come and rescue them. And in 2000, when Jack was trapped on Endora after a meteor strike had buried the Stargate, the Tollan said they could have a ship in the vicinity of Endora sometime next year. Again, they don't outright directly say that the ships are slower, but I'm not sure why it would take them so long to get around, especially compared to other races like the Goa'uld, who seem to get around pretty easily. With the Aschen, we know even less about their ships other than the fact that they exist and that they are used to get around in their space, although that does imply that their ships are fast enough that it's not really a problem for them. In the Stargate book Relativity, we do get a description of an Aschen warship. The warship itself is described as relatively flat with golden gray color over the hull. The only kind of weapon systems we know about is some kind of energy weapons. We don't know what really powers the engines, but we do know they can at least do sublight and hyperspace. Some of the other features of the ship include a hangar with a stealth lander, which can hold about a dozen people, and a transporter room, which is used for, transporting things. The warship has very powerful energy shields that can withstand multiple hits and localized to retain an atmosphere even if part of the ship is blown off. An interesting addition is that these warships apparently have a cloaking device that can even work in hyperspace. So for here, I definitely say the Aschen have the advantage. Even if you don't count the warship in the book, all we know about Tollan ships are disadvantages. No weapon systems, and again, a possibility, and I'm going to say that again, possibility, that they are relatively slow compared to other ships. Aschen ships don't really seem to have that problem and seem to be able to get around just fine. And again, the fact that Tollan ships seem to have no weapons is a pretty big disadvantage. Allies and enemies. The Tollan definitely have the advantage when it comes to allies, as we know they had contact with more of the advanced races, such as the Nox, Asgard, Tok'ra, and though not advanced, they did have contact with Earth. The Aschen, in contrast, didn't have any allies, as they never made contact with any major spacefaring civilization as far as we know, and the races they did meet they tended to conquer.
But I feel like this really wouldn't factor into the war very much. The Nox wouldn't get involved in the war, or any war at all. The Asgard were too busy dealing with the replicators, and the few ships they could spare, they spent trying to keep the Goa'uld from breaking the treaty. They, at most, might be able to send one ship, and though Asgard ships are extremely advanced, it is only one ship. As for Tok'ra and Earth, they're kind of in the same boat. Neither have any spaceships to do anything. So really the Tollan would pretty much be on their own. And I can definitely see them not asking for help, as when Anubis basically all but conquered Tollan, they didn't ask for help from anyone, and just kind of went along as business as usual. As for enemies, both did share the threat of the Goa'uld, despite whatever the Tollan might have thought, and despite the fact the Aschen had never really met them. If the Goa'uld were to take notice, they'd probably use this opportunity to destroy both, or side with the Aschen to destroy the Tollan, only to then turn on the Aschen. So I guess no one gets any advantages here. Conclusion. So with all these factors, who do I think is the most likely to come out on top? To be honest, I'm gonna have to side with the Aschen. Now, wait, before you rush to the comments, hear me out. I know what a lot of you are going to say, but the Tollan's ion cannon defense system would make any attempt on the planet impossible. Well, yes, but actually no. Here's the thing about the defense system. Yes, it provided a near-perfect defense system for Tollan and had kept the Goa'uld away. Here's the thing. It's the only defense system for the planet. No ships with weapons to defend the planet in case something goes wrong. No military to speak of besides a token security force. Oh, how this clip ended up here. There's just nothing. And as I said, it's a near-perfect defense system, not a perfect one. We have seen it fail twice. The first was when the Goa'uld, in an actual display of brilliance, painted the locations of the ion cannons and destroyed them before they could fire on them. The second was with Anubis and his more advanced shields the cannons couldn't break through. We know the Aschen are more advanced than the Goa'uld, so it's possible their ship's shields could withstand the cannons. Boom, game over for the Tollan. But let's say the ion cannons can break through the shields. You can outthink the system, it seems. If the Aschen have cloaking technology, just send a cloak ship down and either disable the defense systems or drop a bioweapon. Boom, game over again. But let's say we only count technology as we see it in the show, they can still outthink the defense system. For example, let's say the Aschen have a ship in orbit of Tolana, and when the Tollan kick them out, they decide to drop one of their bioweapons while they have the chance. They seem to keep them on their harvesters, so I'd imagine their ships have them too. The Aschen just have more advantages here. More worlds, better ships, and the need to conquer. The only real advantages the Tollan have may be their technology and their allies, most of whom wouldn't come to their aid anyway. Though let's be real here, if SG-1 got involved, they would somehow save the Tollan because 90% of the time, SG-1 is so good they kill more gods than Kratos. But yeah, I think in the end, the Aschen would ultimately win. As we've seen, they're willing to wait decades for their plans to come to fruition, so what's to say they wouldn't be able to spend, say, a year trying to take Tolana? The only real reason I can think of them not winning would be them just giving up because they didn't want to fight. As for the aftermath of this war, I can definitely see the Aschen becoming the dominant power in the Milky Way galaxy, as they would not only gain new technologies from the Tollan, but they would also find a new sense of confidence in taking on other powers, such as the Goa'uld. I can definitely see them wiping out the Goa'uld like they did in the original timeline, which would most likely lead to the, if not wiping out, near extinction of both the Jaffa and the Tok'ra, which basically means there's no one left in the Milky Way galaxy to protect the Milky Way galaxy from the Aschen, as the Asgard were too busy with the replicators. As a strategy, I can definitely see the Aschen going to the former worlds of the Goa'uld Empire and basically offering them technology and membership in their confederation. But really, it would just be a chance to make them slaves in all but name and introduce the sterility drug. So yeah, this is kind of depressing. And that is my Tollan vs. Aschen video. I hope you guys all find it enjoyable. Again, I'm really sorry this took a lot longer to come out, but, you know, school and stuff. Hopefully now that it's over the holidays, I can actually work and make more videos, and next semester classes won't be as bad, hopefully. In the meantime, if there's something you want to see, comment. Subscribe. Like, ring bell notification. Other random thing that all YouTubers say.